I just put in a fresh nicotine pouch, so I am chock full of stimulants and ready to rip. This episode is How Should Hunters Train in May? And it flows from the last episode where we talked about hunters ought to train in April, because both are part of the late off-season training block. So the late off-season training block is a transitional phase where we take the base that we built during the early off-season training block, add a little bit more specificity, but also take the strength and aerobic capacity that we built during the early off season and start to develop it into the specific stuff that we're going to work on during the preseason. So we're looking at the goals, right? The goals would be improve our strength endurance, improve our higher end output, and also spend more time under load because we got to get ready for what we're going to do in the preseason. So to do that, we're doing things like use training. We started with high intensity continuous training last training phase, first 3 weeks. We've transitioned into a different way to build muscular endurance, which I'm really excited about, and is working really well for people. And of course, we're maintaining our aerobic capacity. So we're going to get into that, and we're going to do that right now. So I'm going to jump over to the program, and I'm going to walk you through what we're doing day by day. So on Mondays are strength day, strength endurance day, and we're doing use training. Now, the difference this time is instead of pairing an upper body movement and a lower body movement for use training, we're doing a block of just lower body and then a block that is an upper body superset. So we're doing this to give our lower body more training volume. It needs more training volume for what we do than our upper body does. So we're building the volume throughout the weeks to do that. Now, this is all bilateral movements, meaning that you're using both legs at the same time. So folks can front squat, they can deadlift, they can do various other squatting and deadlifting movements. And the thing I love about use training, besides the fact that it really improves your strength endurance, is it is just such a great mental training tool. Because, the goal, right? So the initial goal is, right, you're going to do something, you're going to use some weights that likely provoke a little bit of anxiety, right? So, our sets go from 12 minutes to 15 minutes up to 18 minutes by the end of the 3 weeks. Now, looking at that, and 18 minutes doesn't sound that long, but when you have 18 minutes of just straight up front squats and you're doing sets of 3 and you have to use relatively heavy weights, it's going to cause you to get inside your head a little bit. And that is the goal. So even if you're not super worried about the weight, things start going through your head about wanting to rush, wanting the time to go faster, thinking about how many rounds you're going to get in, all of that kind of stuff. And all of these thought inputs are an opportunity for people to work on just staying present and controlling what they can control, which is super important across life. But think about all the scenarios that we get into while hunting that are just out of our control. Can't do shit about them. All you can do is control what you can control. So what it does is brings you back to the only thing that you can control, which is your breath. So when you hear these thoughts start popping around in your head, you just come back to your breath and you focus on that. And as soon as your heart rate drops to 160 minus your age, you just go again. Do your set. You keep your heart rate under 150. Under 150 for most folks. You do your set. When it comes back down, you go again. And all you can focus in on are doing your set and executing it well. So you focus in the moment, you keep it snappy, you keep the weight where it needs to be based on the heart rate designations. You rest, you breathe, you wait, you go again. And so over the years, I've used it a lot in a lot of different situations. And just the way that it builds an internal locus of control instead of, being so concerned about external factors or even your thoughts and them driving your behavior, it teaches you to just stay present, control what you can control, and then let everything else go. So it's as good for mental skills work as it is for strength endurance work. And so, that's really the thing that I love to do the most. Is it almost becomes meditative, right? Because you're just there. You do your lifts, you breathe, you do your lifts, you breathe, you do your lifts, and it's a really good way to make the rest of the world kind of just melt away. And I, over the years, I've had people tell me that they love it for a lot of different reasons. Some people like it just because it's designated by time, so you're not concerned about how long it's going to take you to do something. Some people don't like that because then they feel like they're going to watch the clock and then they have to control their mind that way. But I across the years from multiple people I've heard, man, it just feels like just a meditative experience where you're just there. You're not doing anything else. And it's awesome for that. But, we're doing sets of 3 to keep the weight relatively heavy because we want to, stay towards the higher end of the strength scale right now. We'll do some strength maintenance stuff later in the preseason, but right now we want to take that strength and turn it into strength endurance. And you have to have heavy enough weights to make that work for you. And also to, kind of stay within the heart rate parameters. Like if you have the weight too low, you might do a set and your heart rate only gets up to 125. And if you're 40 years old, like I am, you go and your heart rate hits 120. And so you're just constantly moving. So it kind of defeats the purpose of what we're trying to accomplish. But marrying all of those parameters together is just beautiful for developing yourself physically, but also mentally. And I really love it as a training tool. Use it with everybody. I mean, I've used it with sport athletes. I've used it with operators. We use it with regular folks at our gym, people getting ready for high rocks, whatever event that is going to require strength endurance. And for us as hunters, I mean, we are strength endurance athletes, especially if you're doing any kind of backcountry or mountain hunting, because you're under load the whole time and you're moving up and downhill. So you have to have access to your strength for a long periods of time. And this starts to train your body to do that. So on top of that, we are sticking with power work. And, we did, I told you guys last month that we were doing repeated jumps. We're doing them again this month, but we've just increased the reps to give ourselves more volume of that, more chances for our body to gather and redirect force, which is important for downhill movement. So, for example, I'm doing repeated kettlebell jumps. You hold a kettlebell between your legs and you jump. As soon as you hit the floor, you go again. It really trains that ability of your quads to rebound and catch you, And so we're doing that. Anterior core work, really important. Anterior core work would be what you think of as your abs. Really important for maintaining spinal health when you're under load a lot, which we're more now than we were in the early off season. But also as we get into the preseason, we're going to need that resilience. And then things like suitcase marching, which is where you just hold a weight on one side of your body and you march in place. Huge for getting your body to resist the force of your pack, because whether you realize it or not, when you're moving under your pack, your pack's trying to twist you, it's trying to bend you over to each side, and building the resilience to be able to fight that is great for performance, but it's also great for keeping your back and your hips healthy. Another thing that we're doing is resistance training is starting to be geared more towards moving in the mountains, right? So we're doing things like curtsy step downs, where you step down from a box and one leg crosses behind the other, training the outside of our hips to be able to handle awkward steps. 3-port dumbbell rows, we're doing some stuff like that because, well, you spend a lot of time bent over when you're skinning a critter, right? And so we need our lower back to be resilient, but also we have to fight rotation when we do it, which is really important just from a human standpoint, but also as a hunter. And then single leg RDLs, really impactful for building your hamstring strength to be able to pull you uphill under load. So, on Mondays, that's what we're doing. There's also an optional zone 1 and zone 2 day workout on that day, 30-minute, just to accrue some volume. So folks can do that as well. And when we're doing that now, and as we get later into the year, like as we get into the preseason, I'm going to walk that down and do just straight up zone 1, because we'll be doing some more heavy rucking in zone 3 and stuff like that. So I don't want to give us too much intense conditioning that we're not going to recover from. So that's also an option on Mondays. And then we look at our high intensity day, which would be Tuesday, high intensity conditioning day. And it's following the same progression that it did, the last time, but we've just added something. Now, for clarity's sake, I'm talking about the version of the program that our Backcountry Ready members are getting, because I have more information on them because I test them. So I can make better prescriptions and say, hey, you're ready for this type of conditioning, or hey, you need to stick with this type of conditioning to make sure that you develop your conditioning in the way that you need to. So if someone's aerobic system isn't where it needs to be, not going to throw them into a bunch of intense conditioning, both because they still have low hanging fruit to grab, and also they're not going to get as much out of that conditioning because they just don't have the delivery system built that they could. So grab the low hanging fruit and continue to develop that way before you layer stuff that people aren't ready for on top of it. So the Pathfinder folks are just doing loaded incline training in zone 2, but our Backcountry Ready folks, they have a progression, and so they could be doing short zone 3 intervals to kind of develop the top end of their aerobic system and a little bit of their anaerobic system. They might be doing short lactate threshold intervals to start to work on that higher end and really start to be able to continue to move at higher intensities, is the simplest way to say it, but also start to push that line up where they still have access to their aerobic energy system. But then we also have what I've called hard plus coast intervals. And so I did a bunch of research into VO2 max training and different ways that people are doing it, and different research on it and everything like that. And we used to do just straight VO2 max intervals, which would be something like working at a 9 out of 10 intensity for like 5 minutes straight, and then having a handful of minutes to rest, 3 to 5 minutes to rest, and then just repeating that. And the research shows that you can get the same effect by varying the intensity throughout the interval. But then I also thought, I'm not so worried about pushing people's VO2 max with VO2 max training. First of all, we don't do enough of it to really use it for that purpose. Plus, you'll increase your VO2 max if you do enough aerobic training. If you're getting your aerobic volume, and your VO2 max will go up. But really, when I'm looking at this kind of training, what I want is to train people's hearts to contract harder, right? So we're looking at maximizing cardiac output. Doing a bunch of aerobic training lays the base for that, right? Because when you're doing aerobic training at the right intensity, you get more cardiac output via something called left ventricular hypertrophy. The blood pool in your left ventricle stretches it, then that makes it contract more and pushes more blood out. Now, what we're doing is we're laying something on top of that to make your heart able to work harder and faster. And so that's really the purpose that we use VO2 max training for, is what will be called cardiac power. And so these hard plus coast intervals are great for that. So essentially what you do is you work really hard for 30 seconds, almost as hard as you can, and then you back it down to like a 7 or 8 for a minute and a half, and you repeat that 3 times, and it's a set. And that's the focus there. So folks that have developed their conditioning to the point where they can get that, they're doing that because we're just really trying to maximize their cardiac output with some cardiac power. But that's layered in a way that's just based on testing. If there's a small enough space between the top of someone's zone 2 and zone 3, we do lactate threshold training and progress into the hard plus coast intervals. But if someone's not there yet, like there's still a huge gap between their zone 2, the top of the zone 2 and the top of their zone 3, so which would be their aerobic threshold and their anaerobic threshold, there's no point in doing it yet. There's still too much low hanging fruit to grab, and they likely don't have the capacity recovery to handle it. Another thing you want to look at with something like that is how strong is somebody. Because if someone's not good enough at generating force, they're not going to get as much out of that training because they just can't recruit their muscles in the way that they need to. They can't push themselves hard enough. So likely what will happen is not only will they not get the training adaptation that you want, they could end up beating the shit out of themselves. And so we want to look at all of these factors before we do a ton of higher intensity conditioning. Wednesdays, we take off. We only train 5 days a week. And if your volume's in the right place, the intensity's in the right place, most people don't need to train 6 days per week. It just a lot of people, based on their schedules and their lives, they don't recover well from that, from training 6 days per week. Plus, um, it's you. I'm a big fan of minimum effective dose, right? So you do the amount that you need to move people forward. So if like you like I put out some case studies and stuff of our members from the early off season, some on like Instagram, some through our newsletter list. Which, if you're not signed up for that yet, why don't you? I send out 5 great emails per week, educational. I don't ever spam you with bullshit. So you should go to our website and get on our newsletter list if you're not. In fact, I'll put a link below so you can get on and then get some of our free resources as well. So, like, for example, people really improved their aerobic capacity and pushed their aerobic threshold higher on like 3 to 3.5 hours of aerobic training per week. Now, as you get in better shape, you need more volume to be able to do that. But for most hunters, somewhere in that 3 to 4 hours per week is good to move your aerobic threshold forward. So we don't need to hammer people. You don't need the 6 day per week schedule to really get to where you need to be with your fitness. So we're training 5 days per week. So we take Wednesdays off, we take Sundays off, and go in there. And then, some people don't hit every workout every week, and that just happens with life, man. We're all people. We all have lives outside of training and hunting, and things come up, so sometimes people don't get it all in, but that's just where you set your priorities and look at, based on where you're at, what's going to be the most impactful thing for you. Is it going to be to miss a strength session and, get in more conditioning? If that's what you need, then skip the strength session and get the extra aerobic work in, or whatever it might be. Or if, you're not strong enough and your aerobic system's in a really good place, it might be wiser to skip the aerobic session and do your strength work. Okay. But on Thursdays, we come back in, and this is our muscular endurance day. We also have an other optional 30-minute zone 1, zone 2 day on that day as well. So with the muscular endurance stuff, I came up with a process of pre-fatiguing the legs and the quads, and then doing step ups to increase our ability to recruit high threshold motor units, which would be your fast twitch fibers, to build some fatigue resilience in them. And so what we've done with that is we've kept basically the same setup, but we've increased the time of the eccentrics on the split squats that we do. So we're going down for 5 seconds to really start to pre-fatigue the quads. And so we're doing 3 sets of that, but we're also doing our extensive power work. Extensive means for essentially doing it for a longer period of time. And we're doing it with like low rebound jumps. So hit the floor and right back up fast, just to build some resilience and spring in our lower legs and feet. We do a lot of walking. We need that resilience. That's built in with some core work and some mobility work to prepare us to be able to handle all the pack work that we're doing as well. Now, and then just some general strength work along with those split squats. Like we do it in a superset, a 3 exercise superset, an upper body movement, 2 upper body movements, I should say. One's a push and one's a pull, just to balance out our strengths. And, using the unilateral movements also helps, fight rotation. So we're really focused on that as well. Now, instead of doing high intensity continuous training after that this time, we're doing pack step up intervals. And so for the folks that did the 10-minute step up test, which are the people in Backcountry Ready, we're basing it off of that. So we took whatever they did in that 10 minutes, took it down to an average pace, and then are doing a percentage of that for their pace during each interval. Again, we're taking that, really high end muscular endurance, like fast twitch muscular endurance we built with HICT, and putting it more into a specific context with the repeated step ups to build more muscular endurance after pre-fatiguing quads. So let's say someone did 300 step ups during their 10-minute step up test. So 90% of that would be what we did we're going to do 90% of that pace during week 1. And so that would come out to be like 25 to 27 step ups per minute. And so that's the pace someone maintains, and they're doing 2 sets of that with a break in between, which is at a higher. So we're doing 2 sets of 6 minutes on week 1, and then we're progressed from there. but then you get a higher total volume because we're doing it for longer, because the step up minute test lasts 10 minutes. So we're doing more work than we would. And what this is going to help us do is transition into more of the higher intensity uphill work that we're going to do. So we're going to be transitioning to more zone 3-ish type uphill work in the early part of the preseason. And so we're building fatigue resistance in our legs to be able to handle that training and get the most out of it. So we're transitioning into that. And it's a bitch, but it's working. I mean, if you think about what we need in the mountains, it is fatigue resistance for the most part. And a lot of that comes from muscular endurance. So setting ourselves up to perform while a little bit fatigued is a really good idea, and it's working well. And it's a really good transition point from the high intensity continuous work that we did last phase to getting ready for the just continuous zone 3 work that we're going to be doing coming up. And we've maintained our high volume calf raises. We need our calves to be fatigue resistant, so we're maintaining that. We cut back the heavier calf work, just maintain that. And then what I'll do in the preseason, since we are progressing more towards higher intensity zone 3 work, is I'll cut the higher volume calf raises, bring back the heavier calf raises, and then we'll do some calf stretching to maintain the health and stuff of our lower legs. And then we're doing some regular good old zone 2 loaded incline. Folks can do that outside if they have access to long enough climbs, or they can do it on the treadmill. Just maintaining our aerobic capacity. So with all of this other stuff that we're doing, our aerobic capacity work has decreased. When you increase intensity, volume typically needs to drop. Now, some of that volume will come back up a different way as we get into the preseason, but for now, we don't need as much of that volume. We just need to get comfortable under our packs for long periods of time, and being ready to go and do more of that zone 3 work, which we'll do more of in phase 1 of the preseason. But we're just maintaining our aerobic capacity, continuing to build volume under our pack. And it's enough work to not necessarily really push your aerobic capacity forward, but to keep it in the place that we need it to. So, we have 2 sessions at the end of the week. Each can last from 45 to 90 minutes. We don't really have anybody doing 90 minutes and 90 minutes back to back like that. They don't really need to be, but if you're hitting a 45-minute to a 60-minute session, a 75-minute to a 90-minute session, that's a really good place to be if you've been training with us the whole time and you're you've progressed through a lot of aerobic capacity work. If you're not there yet, if you're not training with us, you probably need more aerobic capacity work. And so you would want to trade that Tuesday day where we do higher intensity work. You'd probably want to do more aerobic work there to keep your volume up and to continue to make progress. But, the other big takeaway from that is you need incline work now. That's one of the things that you just really can't avoid this time of year. The general aerobic work is great earlier in the year, and there's a place for it in your training, depending how much time and how much volume that you can do. There's still a place for it. But, if you're going to go out and hunt on mountains, you got to get your legs ready for the mountains. And that means inclines. You got to start doing the specific training. So you really have to work that in now. So if you're working on strength endurance, working on muscular endurance, working on uphills and doing some of the things like we're doing to prepare for downhills, which we'll get into more in the preseason that's coming up, that's a good place to be. So that is how we're training right now in May. I don't know why I went to a Southern accent. That's how we're training right now in May. That setup is, I think, a really optimal setup for people for hunters to start really getting specific and preparing for hunting season. And I think it's so good because that's what we do it, or I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it was the right thing to do. I would be doing something else, but this works. This is what we're doing. And, if you're not training with us, you probably should be. You should go check out Backcountry Ready on the website. It's our flagship program. You get assessed as soon as you come in. I put you on the right path. I start you in the right point in the progression for you based on your testing. Point you in the right direction with the right strength movements, the right mobility movements, the right types of conditioning, and the right conditioning progression to make sure you get going in the right direction. I'm also checking in on you, looking at your workouts, commenting, reading your comments, and I'm available to talk to make that you're dialed in. So, and then we retest at regular intervals to mark progress, but also to be able to make training adjustments. And, even if I see something in a workout and I say, hey, maybe you should switch to this now, I'm going to make sure that you get coached up and you get going in the right direction. So you're ready for hunting season this year and every year after that. So you continue to make progress year round. And that's something that a really big push for me is making people realize that if you want to be the best, the most in shape hunter that you want to be, training year round is the best thing to do. And not just for, right now, this year, next year, next few years, but if you want to do this for the rest of your life, you can't do I start in May or June, get ready for September. And then, once October's over, I just kind of bag it. And then I start again in June. You're just never going to keep yourself healthy enough or fit enough to keep doing the things that you want to do, not only in hunting, but outside of life. Like, it's modern life, man. We have to train. We have to maintain and make our bodies stronger because we just don't use them enough in other contexts. And it's just building the resilience to keep yourself strong and healthy. It's so damn important to train year round. So whether you're doing that with us or not, you need to be doing it. I'd rather you do it with us because I know I'll sit you in the right direction and you'll make progress for as long as you train with us. But if you're not, it's at least be training year round. Again, head to the website. I'm going to put the link in the show notes for Backcountry Ready. Sign up. We'll get you tested. We'll get you going in the right direction, and I will have you ready for hunting season. I can, based on where you're at, like if you haven't been training, like might as well start, but you're not going to be as far as you could be if you had started training earlier. But I will have you pointed in the right direction as ready as possible for hunting season. As always, thanks for watching and listening, and we're going to see you next time.